It is convention season in the world's superpower, and this is what it looks like.
Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up!
Supporters of one of the democratic world's oldest and most venerated political parties, literally baying at their opponent, Hillary Clinton. Tonight, Trump is the candidate, so what if he wins? And where is all this hate coming from? Also on News at 10. All roads lead to Berlin. Our new Prime Minister gets little Brexit clarity from the German Chancellor, but back here she lays into Jeremy Corbyn.
I suspect that there are many members on the opposition benches who might be familiar with an unscrupulous boss. A boss who doesn't listen to his workers, a boss who requires some of his workers to double their workload, and maybe even a boss who exploits the rules to further his own career. Remind him of anybody?
The battle for Labour intensifies. 180,000 people have signed up as supporters in the last 48 hours. Sam, it's for you. England has a new manager, but is a man who's never won a major trophy the best we can get? And Elton John at the AIDS conference in South Africa. We are not winning the battle against the disease, he says.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. It has been so long coming that it's easy to miss the significance of the moment. But tonight we can say for sure that Donald Trump is the Republican candidate, and he really could be, indeed, very well might be the next leader of the free world. It's a statement of the blindingly obvious to say that almost certainly would not be political business as usual in the world's superpower. But that's not really the point tonight. The point lies in the reaction of his supporters on the floor of the convention, which was, quite frankly, extraordinary. They were literally baying at their opponent, Hillary Clinton. So is this just the new politics?
Even amid extraordinary Republican turmoil, there is no doubt that Trump is a master of the dramatic. His campaign orchestrating his arrival here to the theme music of the film Air Force One. Along with his vice presidential nominee, Governor Mike Pence, Trump is now projecting himself as on a glide path to the White House.
The great state of Alabama,
Arizona,
Mississippi,
Maryland,
California!
Last night was much more than mere political theatre. It was also confirmation of the most astonishing outcome in presidential politics for decades.
89 delegates!
It was the New York delegation that put Trump over the required threshold.
Congratulations, Dad, we love you!
Trump's son completed the roll call that a year ago would have been unimaginable. By video link from Manhattan, Donald Trump accepted the prize.
We're going to win the presidency and bring real change and leadership back to Washington.
And it felt like a political dynasty was being born, his son taking the stage in prime time.
And when we elect him, we'll have done all that. We'll have made America great again, greater than ever before.
2 votes abstain.
But you could find among delegations on the floor pockets not just of anger, but frankly, of moral despair.
It's the kind of thing you read about in a dictatorship or a third world monarchy. It's an embarrassment. I feel embarrassed to be an American right now. I've never said that before in my life.
Anti-Trump forces haven't just lost, they've been crushed.
So the insurrection is over. Donald Trump has seized control and in the process changed the direction and the very character of one of America's great political parties.
In Libya and Nigeria, guilty.
Republicans are in a vindictive mood. The governor of New Jersey, a former prosecutor, conducting a mock trial of Hillary Clinton.
Is Hillary Clinton guilty or not guilty?
It wasn't just that the delegates shouted guilty. These are proud Americans of a mainstream party demanding a political opponent is locked up.
Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her
This is a party changing its very identity before our eyes.
Well, Robert, you said it there. I mean, all rhetoric aside, is it your assessment that American politics is getting uglier?
Well, look, I'm not sure what you call what's happening here. Do you call it a revolution, an insurrection, a mutiny of angry rank-and-file members of the party? But there's no doubt that the Republican Party is being radically transformed. Remember, Tom, this is the party of free trade, of an assertive foreign policy, of trying to grow its political base, attracting minorities. But under Donald Trump, it's becoming almost the antithesis of that. It's becoming isolationist, protectionist, on its fringes even outright xenophobic. And in terms of the mood on the floor here, this anti-Hillary sentiment is both striking and slightly shocking. You can take the view, look, this is all raucous convention fun, it's a political game. Or you can take the view that what Chris Christie did here last night was incitement, that it shames this party and this country's politics. What is really clear, though, is that the middle ground of American politics is simply disappearing. It is all becoming much more polarized and much more personal.
Robert, it's going to be a fascinating race once again. Thank you. Well, back here, we have, of course, had a political revolution of our own, but we are still no closer to knowing what Brexit is actually going to mean, or even when it's going to begin in earnest. In Berlin today, the German Chancellor told Theresa May there wouldn't be any negotiations until we triggered Article 50. But Mrs May's message to Mrs Merkel was equally firm. That won't be happening anytime soon, she said, at least not until Britain works out what it wants. That said, it was fairly clear that many Germans are, well, let's politely call it, puzzled that Britain doesn't have a Brexit plan.
Theresa May has said more than once in the last week she's going to make a success of Brexit. Well, if she is, she needs to make a success of it with this woman. Chancellor Merkel is the EU's most influential leader, so no surprise Theresa May's first foreign visit was to Germany.
So the Prime Minister arrives in Berlin, where a German government is determined there will be no talks, none, until Britain has formally triggered its exit from the EU.
But Theresa May is refusing to be rushed. That trigger, known as Article 50, won't happen this year, which is why this meeting was much more about relationships than any real progress.
Vielen Dank, es freut mich sehr, in Berlin zu sein.
Saying in German, unscripted as it happens, that she was delighted to be in Berlin is not a bad start, and the Prime Minister was asked how the two of them got on.
Two women who, if I may say so, I think get on with the job and both want to deliver the best possible results.
Genau, dem schließe ich mich.
Exactly so, her host responded. But there's no secret that Germany would like to see sometime soon Britain's plan for the single market and for that other important matter, the free movement of people.
One of the messages that the British people gave in their vote that the UK should leave the European Union was that they wanted to see control brought into the movement of people from the European Union into the United Kingdom.
You'll note she said control the flow of people, not stop it altogether. But here in Berlin, they've been somewhat alarmed by Britain's make-it-up-as-you-go approach to Brexit. After all, being unprepared is not very German.
Germany has been a little bit baffled. Germans like to think Britain is a pragmatic country, people are strategic, they know what they want, and suddenly you wake up on the 24th of June, the British electorate has said we want to leave, and suddenly those who were saying we'll take you out don't have a plan.
But this wasn't just a big day for Theresa May because of her visit here. It was also her first ever Prime Minister's questions, and if she was feeling apprehensive, it didn't show.
In my years here in this House, I've long heard the Labour Party asking what the Conservative Party does for women. Well, just keeps making us Prime Minister. I suspect that there are many members on the opposition benches who might be familiar with an unscrupulous boss. A boss who doesn't listen to his workers, a boss, and maybe even a boss who exploits the rules to further his own career. Remind him of anybody?
The theatre of the Commons is one thing, but Mrs May's time in office will be determined by how she gets Britain out of the EU, and that work began here. Chris Ship, News at 10, Berlin.
Well, from the start, Eurosceptics have said clearly that Germany would do a deal with us on equitable terms because it will have to in order to protect its own business interests. But that argument is, of course, about to be tested in earnest. So what is the real balance of power? Our economics editor, Nerina Hertz, has been taking a look.
The British and German economies have been working side by side for over 40 years. But just how important is the trade relationship between the UK and Germany?
Well, the UK is Germany's third most important trading partner after the USA and France. And Germans sold us £48 billion more in goods and services last year than we sold to them. For some industries, such as cars and engineering, retaining today's trade terms with the UK is essential. Take cars. About a fifth of all those produced in Germany last year, or around 820,000 vehicles, were exported to the UK, making it the single biggest destination by volume. The UK market is worth around £15 billion, which means that huge German car companies like Volkswagen or BMW want to be able to continue to export their cars to Britain without paying a penalty. For them, import duties imposed on German goods would be very costly.
Whilst Brexit may create problems for the mighty German car industry, German financial services could end up victorious.
The Brexit debate has obviously emboldened Paris and especially Frankfurt to try and start taking away business away from the city. And this can happen because of our access to the single market. There's something called passporting. And a lot of foreign companies are based here because they can operate within the European Union, and that will be called into question.
Different industries will want different outcomes, but it will be political, not only economic considerations that will determine what kind of deal for the UK Angela Merkel will ultimately support. Nerina Hertz, News at 10.
Well, Chris Ship is still in Berlin tonight. Chris, the Prime Minister off to Paris tomorrow, where I suspect her reception will be a bit frostier. But do you get any sense yet of what Europe's biggest powers make of Brexit, what their plans are?
Well, Tom, really the short answer to that is no. Look, Theresa May came here to Berlin on her first foreign trip. She looked unfazed. She'd just been at the House of Commons, where she looked pretty at ease, in command of the chamber there. And tonight she's had dinner with Angela Merkel, where I'm told they discussed Turkey, they discussed Ukraine and they discussed Russia. So yes, this was more than about Brexit. But you know, the Germans here can hardly hide the fact that they're surprised that we didn't simply have no plan for Brexit, as if we didn't see the vote coming, which, as we know, we didn't. And Theresa May, I think in talks with Angela Merkel today, she's managed to get the Germans to agree to give her more time to invoke Article 50. And that's just as well, because we don't have an idea what we're going to do about the free movement of people, for example. Yes, one thing, as Theresa May said, you can say you can control free movement of people, but how does that impact on getting access to the single market? And those answers simply weren't forthcoming here. She has another chance to do that in Paris tomorrow. She meets President Francois Hollande. I think there'll be a different atmosphere there. Remember, in Paris, domestic politics always plays a greater role than here in Berlin. Of course, there was those dreadful events last week in Nice, so therefore counter-terrorism will play a greater part as well. And I remember listening to President Hollande a few months ago talk about consequences for Britain if we left the EU. Well, we're leaving now, and I wonder if tomorrow he'll tell Theresa May just what those consequences might be.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Now back here, an astonishing statistic emerged from the Labour Party leadership contest tonight. A total of 183,541 people have applied to become registered supporters of the party with a right to vote in the last 48 hours. To give you a sense of perspective, the Tory party only has around 120,000 members in total. And at £25 a pop, that's a windfall of over £4.5 million. Carl Dinnan is in Westminster. Carl, this is a very unfair question to ask, an impossible one to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Do we have any sense of who these new members are and which way they're likely to vote? Are they Corbynistas or not?
Well, what we can say is that last time out, when we had these registered members, 84% of them voted for Jeremy Corbyn. and both sides agree that plenty of these people will want to do it. His people think more of them will want to go for him, but the other side have been making bigger efforts this time around to try and encourage people to sign up. It is an incredible feat. I mean, the Labour Party raised the price of this in the hope that there wouldn't be so many people who weren't committed to the Labour Party cause trying to join up. Last time around it was £3 a go, and 105,000 people said they wanted, eventually ended up voting in the leadership election. This time at £25 a head, 183,000 people have joined up. And if Owen Smith is to get anywhere, he probably needs all of that increase to vote for him. Now, these aren't the only people who will be voting in this election. There are Labour members, there are trade union members, and there are 2 months to go. But as we stand here tonight, Jeremy Corbyn's chances of getting re-elected look much stronger, whatever that means for the future of the Labour Party.
OK, well, it certainly is intriguing. Thank you, Carl. Now, the clampdown after the failed coup in Turkey intensified tonight, with President Erdogan declaring a 3-month state of emergency. He said it was being put in place to help take measures swiftly and effectively against those who planned the coup attempt. The president said the decision was within Turkey's constitution and did not amount to a move against the rule of law. Once again tonight, the Ministry of Defence is at the centre of an investigation into the death of a soldier on a training exercise. Corporal Josh Hoole, who was just 26, had completed an 8-mile road march in Brecon when he collapsed and died. His heartbroken family told ITV News he'd been planning to get married, but tonight much does remain unclear. It was a hot day, but the exercise was a relatively routine one taking place early in the morning. So, a tragic accident or another example of the army failing in its duty of care?
An experienced soldier pushing hard to better himself and improve his rank. At home, he and his fiancée were planning their wedding. Next week, Corporal Joshua Hoole on the left was due to be his brother Tyrone's best man. And now he is dead.
Josh was 26, just on the 12th of July, and a good lad. I sadly missed, but it was a job he had to do, and he was a dedicated soldier. He died doing the job that he loved.
Josh Hoole died on the hottest day of the year, but the super-fit soldier was on an early morning routine exercise around the barracks, and it's not known if heat and humidity contributed. When the SAS reservists, James Dunsby, Edward Mayer and Craig Roberts died in this area, they were pushing themselves to the limit. The military were found wanting then, and will need to provide answers now. When the 3 reservists died here on SAS selection, much of what was found to have gone wrong was based around the preparation and planning of that exercise. Once again, questions are being asked at the very highest level within the MOD about whether or not preparation and planning for an exercise was as thorough as it should have been.
My heart goes out to his family and his friends. This is a tragedy. He was not involved in Special Forces selection. This was a training for a career course for him to be promoted. We're still investigating what took place, and we'll learn the lessons that come from that.
Previously, the MOD were found to be failing in the Brecon Beacons. And whatever the cause of Josh Hoole's death, it will cast light on procedures and raise questions once again about soldiers in training. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10, Brecon.
After the failure of Euro 2016 and, let's be honest, a good many other football tournaments before it, the man expected to be unveiled as England's new manager tomorrow represents something of a change of direction. If his track record is anything to go by, not for Sam Allardyce the niceties of the continental game. The Sunderland manager is better known as a boss with a tough guy approach. Who knows? It might work, though tonight his club says he's still their manager and they're not happy.
It took him 2 interviews, but tonight it seems Sam Allardyce is to become the next manager of England. Allardyce was at a pre-season friendly tonight, but after watching the first half from the dugout and attending to some personal matters on the phone, when the players came out for the second half, he didn't retake his seat. First interviewed in 2006 when Sven-Göran Eriksson resigned, Allardyce was overlooked for Steve McLaren. This time, though, it appears his was the CV that stood out. So what did it say? During his 21 years as a player, Allardyce never won an England cap, but turned out for 9 different clubs. He's made his name, though, as a manager for the last 24 years, his nickname Big Sam. His most successful spell was the 8 years he spent at Bolton Wanderers, taking them into the Premier League and qualifying for Europe. His critics say he's an expert in avoiding relegation, and his sides rely on long ball football, not technical.
It's another wretched night for England.
He's also never won a trophy, but that didn't appear to put off the FA panel assigned to replace Roy Hodgson after England's early exit from Euro 2016.
You need the manager to get tough, and Big Sam is as tough as they come. I played against him many, many years ago, and he was tough as teak, and England needs someone with that reputation at the helm now, because there's been too much mollycoddling for our superstars now. I think they need to know exactly what is required at that level.
Confirmation of the appointment is expected tomorrow after a meeting of the FA board. All that remains is a compensation package to be agreed with Sunderland, the club he took charge of 9 months ago. And yes, he steered them to Premier League survival against remarkable odds. And it's that kind of winning spirit the FA will hope Allardyce can continue. His first game in charge will be a World Cup qualifier in Slovakia in 6 weeks' time. Ian Payne, News at 10.
What can possibly go wrong? Now, from South Africa tonight, Sir Elton John issued a call for the world not to let up in its fight to defeat the HIV virus and combat prejudice against the LGBT community. And speaking to News at 10 at a major HIV conference in the city of Durban, he also praised Prince Harry. The prince was like his mother, Princess Diana, he said, in his ability to break down barriers.
Elton John back on stage today, not as a singer, but as an AIDS activist, a second career that has made him just as many fans in this continent where HIV infection is still such a scourge. And where he told me the disease remains a stigma so that many millions suffer in ignorance and fear.
You've been fighting this battle for 20 years. Are you sad? Are you angry that you're still having to fight it?
I'm not angry. I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful. There are lots of areas where we need to improve, but as far as where we've come an awful long way. Now if a woman is pregnant, she doesn't pass the disease on to a child. That's how far we've come. But there is a generation of kids that are HIV that feels kind of disenfranchised. And we have to rescue them. We have to pay attention, because if we leave any of these groups behind, then all the great work that has happened over the last 25 years is going to come to nothing.
How are you? His own foundation will pilot a multi-million pounds project to take HIV education, testing and support into nations where being gay can be a crime.
Look at the liberalisation that has been in many countries. You're now a married man, but in many parts of the world, it seems that things are going backwards.
The human spirit will always prevail, but it is disconcerting to see people marginalised, to see people fearful to be who they are. And if they are gay and if they have HIV, they're not going to likely to come out. They're going to spread this disease further.
Tomorrow he's joined here by Prince Harry, who, like his mother, campaigns for better HIV treatment.
She could walk into a hospital. She was the first person from the royal family to touch anyone with AIDS. She destigmatised everything in that respect. He has that same ability, and I love him for that.
The medicines have moved on, says Sir Elton, but much harder to shift are attitudes that can kill. John Ray, News at 10, Durban.
Well, back to football for a moment, and Celtic tonight avoided an England-size humbling tonight at the hands of a side made of Gibraltar part-timers. The Scottish champions trail 1-0 after the first leg of their Champions League qualifier against the Lincoln Red Imps. But 3 first-half goals, including these efforts from Lee Griffiths and Patrick Roberts, settle the nerves of fans inside Parkhead, and come to that, those of manager Brendan Rodgers. People are still coming to terms, of course, with the impact on music of the death of David Bowie. His place amongst the most influential musicians of his age is uncontested, but what fewer people might realise is the store the great man himself set by not just his music, but art. Today, his skill and taste as an art collector of international importance went on display in London.
David Bowie was one of the most inventive musicians of all time, but his passion for art was just as complex and inspiring. From this tiny sculpture by Henry Moore to a dazzling canvas by Damien Hirst, Bowie only bought work that moved him.
I've got scars.
Those who knew David Bowie well say his personality is reflected in every single piece.
I can see why he liked them so much. They do have an intensity and a drama that David would have embraced.
David Bowie said of Frank Auerbach's dense and sculpture-like work, "My God, yeah, I want to sound like that looks." And art was as important to him as his music.
David Bowie also experimented with painting and sculpture, exhibiting his own work in 1995.
Would you give up music for art?
No, but neither would I give up art for music. I am really fortunate in having both the time and the inclination and possibly the talent to work in both mediums.
This is the most expensive piece in his private collection. The painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat could fetch up to £3.5 million. Bowie bought it after starring in a film about the American artist playing the role of Andy Warhol. Bowie wasn't just interested in the big names of the art world. He got to know John Virtue visiting his studio. He bought 10 of his monochrome landscape paintings.
I did really like him, very sincere person, very natural person. And that's what I was dealing with, not the myth.
David Bowie's family have kept some of the most personal pieces, but they say it's time to give others the opportunity to appreciate and acquire the art and objects he so admired. Nazanin Moshiri, News at 10.
Well, finally, let's go back now to the United States and a city not far from where the Republican convention is being held. Much of the momentum behind Donald Trump comes from the dispossessed populations of America's former industrial heartlands, people who say they've been ignored by the Washington establishment. It lies in a region now called the Rust Belt, where prosperity has been eaten away by decades of economic decay. Youngstown's population is shrinking. More than 40% of people live below the poverty line. Those who are angry about the current state of the city feel their solution to their problems lies, you guessed it, with one man, Donald Trump.
Well, up until the 1970s, we were still the steel hub of the world. 1977 was Black Monday, everything left. The steel mill started shutting down, and when people were depressed, people were losing their homes, divorce, people moved away. It was crushing. My name's Gino DeFabio. I live in Youngstown, Ohio. I've been here my whole life, 53 years. Hillary is saying, we're going to put a lot of coal companies out of business. Well, that is insane. That's our lifeblood. A lot of my friends are worried. I lost friends that worked here. It's real, and it's not just a few people. There'll be hundreds and hundreds of people. Donald Trump is saying what we've been wanting to hear for the last 35, 40 years. The trade deals this country makes are ridiculous. We get killed. We're sending our jobs overseas, and we're getting nothing back but empty promises.
Well, Donald's on the move all over this land. My name is Bernard Schaefer. I am definitely for Donald Trump for president. He will make this country great again. I believe he will.
Trump says what people are thinking. Do I wish sometimes it would be a little bit more polished? No, I don't. I think he's exactly who we need for this nation at this time in history.
Trump represents that America first, where we have to get our own house in order. Let's clean house and get back to business the way it should be, as when we were great.
I think that President Obama has been a total failure. He's ended up worse than anybody we ever had. I think he's caused people to believe they're entitled to the free system.
All over this land.
I'm Kathy Miller, and I'm the chairperson for the Trump campaign in Mahoning County, and Youngstown is our major city here. We had 6,000 voters change parties to vote for Mr. Trump, so that in itself was like an earthquake. There's a real sense that we're really running out of time. We got to get it together. So I see Mr. Trump as a person who has that energy, that ability, and he knows how to get it done. He's not going to take any crap from people. It's just going to get done.
He don't go begging for our money. He's got plenty of his own. All he needs is our vote to send the rest all home. 'Cause Donald's on the move.
My problem with the border issue is these people are coming across, they're bringing diseases, probably drugs. Some are murderers, some are rapists. They come in and they get on assistance right away.
We need to right now ban all immigration and close the borders. The Trojan horse has arrived and it's here. And if we can't recognize our enemy, if we can't realize and say exactly it's radical Islamists, terrorists, how can we fight them?
What about those that say he's racist?
Well, in my opinion on racist, I'm a racist, okay? As soon as I say something, I'm a racist. I'm a white person. Whenever a white person says something, you're racist. So I think it's all garbage, all crap.
Oh gosh, what does this town need? Leadership, direction, conservative values, Donald Trump.
That's it.
Yes.
Vote Trump. Yes.
Well, there you have it. And do go to our website, itv.com/news, to see the other reports in that series on the divided states of America. Donald Trump's big speech tomorrow, presumably it won't be crib, but let's see. That's it from us for now. Good night. Thanks very much for watching.